Here's a video on how to hemp a reed. This works for pipe reeds or chanter reeds. So I've got a reed that needs rehemping because the copper staple is exposed and we don't want that. So the way I do this is I start with just a little bit covering, pointing down parallel to the reed staple. I pinch it to hold it in place, and then I just give it 2, maybe 3 winds around, going back over that little tail. So now, so long as I keep tension on it, it'll hold that tail in place, it won't come undone. If I pull too hard at this point, it will just unravel. So being careful not to pull too hard, but also not to let it go slack, because then it'll come undone too. So now we wind it nice and evenly, being careful not to go back over the previous windings like that, because then we end up with these bumps, and we want a nice even flush layer all the way around. As you do this, it's fine to leave little gaps like that, because we can come back and again, see how I'm keeping tension on the hemp here. We can come back and get rid of those gaps by pushing it down. Oh, and I forgot to mention, you want to have a pair of scissors already handy when you're doing this, because once your hands are tied up keeping this hemp taut, you don't really want to go looking for tools. And I am doing this with unwaxed hemp. Different pipers have different preferences. I generally prefer unwaxed because I find it compresses a little bit more. It's a little bit thinner than the waxed hemp, so you have more control of exactly how much diameter you're adding to the reed staple. But well, also in the reed makers, when they send you a reed, I notice it always comes with unwaxed hemp. I don't know if there's a reason for that, if they have some insights, or if it's just for practical reasons on their end. Whereas waxed hemp, it'll sorry if you can hear that noise outside. But so waxed hemp, it won't swell with moisture, at least not when it's new. If the wax wears off, of course it will. So maybe it's a little more stable. It'll probably grab a little better in the reed seat because it's stickier. So, there's no real right or wrong here. You'll find your preference. So, okay, now I've gotten to the end. I've made sure there's no gaps in it. The thing is, if I keep going, and notice how I'm keeping it braced, keeping that last winding on, because if I go too far, it'll slip off the end like that. But I don't want the staple exposed, because if the copper here is exposed such that, and then when I put it into the reed seat, if that copper comes in contact with the bottom of the reed seat, it can cause just individual notes to go out of tune, particularly the F and the high A, I believe. So we don't want that. We do our best to cover it as much as possible. So when I get to about this point, I see that the width, that gap left there, is less than the width of the hemp. So if I keep going, it's going to slip off the end. So at this point, keeping tension on it still, I'm going to come back up at a bit of a steep angle to kind of keep the tension on it this way, keep it from slipping off the end. And I'm just going to leave this tail hanging off and test it in my chanter. I've already cut this to length, but you would want to keep your hemp uncut, just you know, working right off the spool like that. So you can just sit it in there like that so that it's not wobbling or loose, but you're also not like jamming it, forcing it hard in there, just enough so it sits snugly. So at this point you test it to see how the tuning is, see how the high A sounds. That's pretty good. With practice chanters, you can control the tuning so much with blowing, it doesn't matter a whole lot how much the hemp there is, but with pipe chanters, you might test that and say, oh, the high A is super sharp, the one layer of hemp is not enough, it might be sitting too low in the reed seat, so at that point, you would, instead of crossing all the way back to the top like that, you would go back and do another smooth, even layer with no gaps coming back down this way. But I'm going to leave it there. So again, trying to keep this from slipping off the end. Just wrap it like that, and I'll tie a little knot in it to keep it from flying loose, like so. And voila. And you can leave a whole bunch of excess up here, so long as it's not down in the reed seat. You can have some excess up here. That won't hurt anything. And then if you do need more hemp, you've already got it attached. But I don't expect I'll need it, so I'm going to go ahead and trim it. There. Done. Beautiful. Nicely hemped reed. Okay, hope that helps. Good luck. It takes some practice, especially getting it to stay tight right at the end without slipping off. But just keep doing it. The more you do it, the easier it gets. Cheers!